And it's like smack. What?
And you're like, that's me? Really? Oh, gosh.
And you brought some of your kids to the studio today. They're here to watch, and they're not kids anymore. No. And you said that took you by surprise.
Big people, yeah. Time just flew. So I brought my makeup artist with me. You know, she's my actress in New York, so she came down for the elections to help Mommy out.
Oh,
isn't that great?
That's great. That is wonderful.
Yeah.
So where did you grow up exactly?
Well, I grew up in, actually I was born and raised in Georgetown, and I grew up on Walker's Road. So right down the street, my first sign that I put up for the elections was above my grandmother's window, where I spent most of my upbringing right under that window with my grandmother. And so I spent a lot of time, that's kind of my stomping ground. So I spent a lot of time on Walker's Road, but I also spent time in the U.S. as well, because my mom was back and forth.
So you got a little taste of all of the, region.
Very
when we
early.
come back, I want to explore it some more. Welcome back to Cayman Now. My guest, Tyson, has just shared a little bit about that she grew up both in Cayman and the United States. And that experience, Catherine, what do you take from that?
Well, from early on, because I went to New York when I was 5 years old. So imagine leaving Cayman to, be introduced to a big city at that young age. It gave me just a larger world view very early on, all the good stuff that comes with it and all the tough stuff that comes with it, being teased for your accent, and, me and my brother, so we were there. And that was really some tough stuff, but it learned, it taught you, it learned you, it did learn you, just how to really, kind of dig your heels in and live your own life and figure out who you are. Because if not, people will figure it out for you. And then you're not living your life. So I spent a couple of years there, and then I came back home. So what was always good about my upbringing is that I'd spend a few years in the U.S., and I'd come back home. And I'd spend a few years home. And then I'd go back to the U.S. So I ended up going back to the U.S. at 12. And I was there for a couple of years. So I became a teenager in the U.S., in Miami and Boston.
Wow.
And then I came back home, and I spent my high school years, my middle school and high school years in Cayman. So, that was just very significant times in my life. And then I went back as a young adult at 19.
So some people may say, who are you identifying with? And if you pretty much split your time between the U.S. and Cayman, how did you maintain that Cayman was truly your home?
Well, the thing about it is the formative years that I spent in the U.S. Were kind of building years, so, the first 5 years of your life is, you're kind of developing who you are, and that was Cayman. So Cayman was always in my heart. And so when I'd spent a few years in the States, I was always very true to being a Caymanian. Mm-hmm. What I love about my upbringing is that it allowed me to kind of see the best of both worlds, see the benefits and the beauty of being an islander, because I never identified as an American. That's what was interesting. No matter how long I spent in the States, Americans
but they say when a West Indian goes overseas, they're the first one to change their accent.
Americans always knew that I was from the islands, always. Yeah. And I love that, and even as an adult, as I was saying earlier, I got married at 20. And so I went to the States and got married, very early, a very young woman, a couple of years out of high school, and, lived a life almost like an American, but was always very clear that I am from the islands. And so the battles that I fought, the way that I fought them was very different from being an American.
Right.
Because there are dynamics in America. There's Black American dynamics, and there's white American dynamics, and Latino American dynamics, and you name it, there are dynamics. And so I was over there basically being a Caribbean, not a Caribbean American, but a Caribbean person. And it really allowed me to just appreciate how wonderful a place that I can call home, that I can call mine, was. And so
you raised your 3 children on your own.
I did. Well, my husband and I, we separated when my children were 6 months, 4 and 5.
Wow.
And so I stayed in the U.S. and finished my education. So I got my bachelor's degree before I came home, because I had a couple of kids, to bring back home with me. And I wanted to come back home because it was home. My mom was here, my dad was here, my family was here.
Your support.
Yeah, so I wanted to come back home, and when you have 3 kids on your own in the States, you lose track of somebody in the grocery store, you might not see them ever again.
Right.
Here, fosters, they bring them to you. This yours? Here.
This happened to be yours.
So it's very, very different. And so that was just the place for me to be. And I felt very comfortable being home, and I felt, the community, and I felt just a safety about being home.
So fast forward to where you are today. You've chosen to run for Georgetown South. Why that area?
Because I'm from Walker's Road, because I'm from Georgetown South. That's where I spent a lot of my years climbing that almond tree by my grandmother's house, going to Smith Back Adair, what we call Smith Cove. Just being involved with Miss Jerry McTaggart, for instance, Miss Mary Thompson. These are ladies that I grew up with. I went to church with Miss Mary Thompson. She was the cradle roll teacher at the Georgetown Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I helped her out. Every time that I'd come back home, I'd find these ladies, Miss Ethel Barnes, I call these ladies aunts, Miss Frida Mitchell down the street. So that's my stomping ground. So when I thought about running, which has been a while now, I never thought that I wouldn't run in Georgetown. I always knew it would be Georgetown. And when they did the constituency thing, I knew it was Georgetown South. That's where I'm from. So
it made sense.
Yeah, it absolutely did make sense. I mean, we walked that neighborhood. We went looking mangoes in the back. I go there now and people are like, "You're Miss Valerie's granddaughter." I love
Isn't that great?
You Ida's daughter. I love that. Yesterday someone said, "You're Truman's daughter." I love it. So,
I'll take it.
I'll take all of it because I'm all of it. So yeah. And it was just a natural choice for me.
Well, it sounds good. And I know that one of the top issues that you're worried about is having Caymanians first.
Absolutely.
Where does that come from?
That comes from, I think, being a social worker in Cayman. I've been a social worker since 1998. I came home. I've been a social worker before that because I graduated in 97 and I worked in the States for a year as a social worker. And I came back home in 98 and to the Cayman Islands government. So I've been a social worker all of my career.
Now that had to give you special insight to some of the problems people face every day. I mean, we get a lot of lip service from other candidates, but you've lived it and you've seen it. Catherine, you were just sharing before the break of your service in the social work area. What do you take from that, and what do you think you can do as a candidate as far as some of those problems you witnessed firsthand?
Well, being a social worker, it gives you an opportunity to really get in depth with people, and in their lives, and see problems from a different angle. So being a social worker does not just expose you to poor people. It just exposes you to people on a whole, and people that have problems.
And challenges.
And we all have problems. We all have challenges. We all have parenting issues. We all have, personal issues, financial things. And we're all just people at the end of the day. The beautiful part, I think, about getting to know my constituency right now is learning that every single one of us, we want the same things. We want love. We want good families. We love our children. We want them to be successful. We want to get ahead in our lives. We want to make the best of it, and we want to be able to flourish. And I've been hearing that from both sides of my community, the affluent side as well as the side that has challenges in terms of finances and different things. How do we take care of ourselves? How are we first in our country? Is are Caymanians being left behind? And I hear that so much.
Well, we also hear concerns with the quality of education.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think that we need to challenge the government at this point. Me now trying to be a part of the government, I totally understand why people should challenge it, and people should challenge it to give the best of what you can give, right? If you're going to have a school system, then the school system should be on the same level as a private school system. And why isn't it? Why isn't it that the bulk of our young people, our children that are going to a system that will be graduating, why are they not getting the very best out of the education system? We're failing them if in fact we're putting them out on the streets, not being equipped. And when I see families taking their children and saying to me that they're putting their children in private school because they feel better about that, mm-hmm. then that tells me that we have a problem that we need to look into. And it's not just beautiful buildings. It's what's happening inside. Because that's our human capital. And they happen to be Caymanian people. So how are we preparing them for tomorrow when you and I have to go sit down, Barrie, because you and I have to go sit down soon, and they have to lead us.
Exactly right.
So how can they lead us if we're not preparing them and providing them, with the best tools that will lead us
Well,
tomorrow?
and what bugs me is education isn't about a building. You can do the best education sitting under an almond tree, and if people want to laugh at that comment, they can go right ahead. But to me, it's the quality of the teaching, of the learning experience. What are we teaching them inside these very nice buildings that we've been able to build? But building another building isn't going to solve what's going on inside those buildings. And those are the tough questions that I think we all have to face up to.
Yes.
We have to admit the problem first.
Exactly.
And then be willing to work on it. But when we cover up and pretty up reports, remember that, folks? Remember when they prettied up that education report?
Yeah.
I mean, stop it already.
Yeah.
You're fooling with our children's lives.
Yeah. Well, they're not fooling me. I can tell you that. And I can tell you why it's not fooling me, because my first child graduated in 2007. And I sat in the audience along with every other parent of 200 and something students, 2007, 10 years ago, when the announcement, the principal's report said only 25% of this graduating class is at the literacy level of this country. I was not happy that my son was a part of that 25%. I was sad that 75% of other people's children were not at the literacy level. I'm very concerned about that. And 10 years later, we've not gotten any better. What we've gotten is a really beautiful school. We've gotten some beautiful buildings. But I come from the days where we went to Truth for Youth School, and we used to take a Joy bottle or a Downy bottle and shake that and wash that out at night, put some water in that, freeze it in the freezer, and take it to school, put it down by our desk, and drink that during a little break. They'd give us a break to drink some water.
What a memory, what a memory.
I remember it all, but
Wow.
let me tell you, Sister
I remember
Pat,
that.
Sister Wilma, Sister Janice, who has passed on now, Sister Wilma and Sister Janice, God rest their soul, Sister Blossom, who's still alive, even Sister Diane and Sister Pat, who's still alive. They made sure we knew how to read and write. We had a Downy bottle. We were taking a little break, drinking, but I'll tell you what, we might have been sweating, but we did not come out of that system not knowing something. I am I guess I'm one of the recipients of that type of learning, and I know a lot of us out there.
No, you know what you were a recipient of? Not just the learning, but the love.
The love, absolutely.
The teachers loved us.
Absolutely.
Like I always bring up Miss Brian and Miss Janaline because I went to prep, and I felt the love from them. Even when they were being tough with us, I felt that they cared that I learned because they wanted me to have a chance in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the difference.
Well, I sent my children, when I first came back home, they were 4, 8, and 9, and I sent them to the Adventist school. Because I wanted a system. They were coming from the American system, and we were making the transition. So I wanted a smaller class makeup, and I sent them there. And I mean, these ladies would literally come out in the parking lot. Miss Tyson, I need to talk to you. Like I'd be picking them up. No, park. Come here. Got to talk to you.
No, I love that. That's what I love about Cayman.